The world, June 1940. France stands at the brink of collapse, while Great Britain fights for survival. For Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, this moment seems like a historic chance to expand his empire. Instead, Italy faces a string of humiliating failures. So why did Mussolini choose to enter the war now? And was Germany partly to blame for Italy's coming disasters? Unlike Germany, Italy has no solid war plans when World War II begins. Still, Germany's widening conflict in 1940 offers Rome a clear opening. On June 10th, Italy declares war on the Allies. Mussolini hopes that supporting Germany's victory will earn Italy major rewards: control of the French fleet, occupation of southern France and Corsica, and colonies like Tunisia or French Somaliland. Italy joins the invasion through the Western Alps. But poor performance and Germany's preference for a cooperative Vichy regime mean that, when France surrenders on June 22nd, Italy gains almost nothing. Yet Italy's actions create alarm in London. As fears of invasion grow, Britain becomes desperate to secure the Mediterranean, a lifeline to its empire. Since the mid-1930s, Italy has expanded across Africa and the Balkans, and British leaders still overestimate its power. The Royal Navy initially pulls ships from the Mediterranean, but Churchill reverses the order. Britain's long-term strategy relies on turning the war into a prolonged struggle, which requires holding the Mediterranean and access to its empire. On June 11th, Italian bombers strike British-held Malta. Elsewhere, Britain takes the offensive. From June 10th, British armored units cross from Egypt into Italian Libya. Most Italian forces lack modern vehicles, heavy weapons, or experience in modern warfare, trained instead for colonial policing. In one clash, Italians form a 19th-century battle square, easily crushed by British tanks. Over 3 months, Italy suffers 3,500 losses to Britain's 150. The British can't expand further, short on men and supplies. But with France defeated, Mussolini orders an invasion of Egypt to seize Alexandria and the Suez Canal. His generals hesitate. When friendly fire kills the respected Italo Balbo, Rodolfo Graziani takes command. A desert veteran, his experience is against lightly armed tribes, not armies. Encouraged by minor success in East Africa, where colonial forces push back a small British garrison, Mussolini presses ahead. Graziani outnumbers Britain's 36,000 troops, but lacks trucks, fuel, and water. After long delays and pressure from Rome, he finally invades Egypt on September 13th, aiming first for Sidi Barrani, 80 kilometers inside the border. As his troops advance, Graziani boasts, "One wonders when the English will understand they are facing the best-equipped colonial army in the world." British forces withdraw, and Graziani halts to build fortified camps near Sidi Barrani, copying colonial tactics. Mussolini demands a further 130-kilometer advance, but Graziani knows his men can't manage it. While pushing into Egypt, Mussolini also eyes expansion closer to home. In 1939, Italy had turned Albania into a protectorate. From there, Rome looks to move into Yugoslavia or Greece to link with Italian islands in the Aegean. Yugoslavia seems too pro-German, so attention shifts to Greece. Foreign Minister and son-in-law Galeazzo Ciano urges action. He insists Greece is corrupt, its army weak, its people indifferent, and that Albanian minorities would welcome Italians as liberators, but others warn against it. King Vittorio Emanuele, Ambassador Emanuele Grazzi, and Chief of Staff Pietro Badoglio remind Mussolini, "The Greeks are good fighters. They proved it against Turkey." Still, Mussolini and Ciano ignore them. Germany too opposes an attack. Berlin wants calm in the Balkans to secure resources, fearing British moves if Italy strikes. Britain guarantees Greek independence, and any presence of British air units there could threaten Romanian oil fields. Germany accepts Greece as within Italy's sphere, but urges delay until Britain falls. Mussolini agrees, at least outwardly. When the Luftwaffe deploys to Romania to protect those oil fields, Mussolini feels insulted. Furious, he decides to act first. "Hitler always presents me with fate's accomplice. This time I'll repay him in kind. He'll read in the papers that I've occupied Greece. Then the balance will be restored." Italian plans escalate from limited to full occupation, but preparations are chaotic. Demobilization for the harvest drains manpower. Officers are unmotivated. Albanian ports are inadequate. Durazzo, the only usable port, is jammed with barges carrying marble for fascist construction projects. Not all troops even receive their heavy weapons. Mussolini hopes Bulgaria will join, but its king refuses. By late October, 6 Italian divisions, including the elite Giulia Alpini, move toward the Greek border. 87,000 Italians expect to meet 30,000 Greeks, though intelligence warns there may be 10 times that number. Italy's loud propaganda and poor secrecy alert Greek dictator Ioannis Metaxas, who plans a defensive withdrawal to Mount Othris, though others favor a counterattack. The mountainous terrain itself limits Italian invasion routes, an advantage for Greece. Mussolini sets October 28th as Invasion Day, the same day Hitler visits Florence, hoping to stun his ally with news of victory. At 3 a.m., after staging border provocations, Ambassador Grazi delivers an ultimatum to Metaxas: allow Italy to occupy key Greek positions or face war. Metaxas replies curtly in French, "Alors c'est la guerre." Well then, it's war. His defiance becomes legendary as "Oci," no. In truth, Italian units like Latinga Fontana's had already begun moving before the ultimatum was even read. The night is dark and rainy. Tomorrow we may hope that Mars will favor us, even though we are. Few among us felt fear. Hand grenades filled our pockets, light as pebbles. Dawn crept in, gray and silent. Car, at first light. Italy's Ferrara, Siena, and Centauro divisions, with 163 light tanks, advance through the Calamus River Valley toward Ioannina, while the Giulia division strikes around Mount Smolikas. A smaller force pushes along the coast. Though Greek leaders expected an Italian move, ordinary soldiers are stunned. We woke up at 6:30. Thunder rumbled from the west, its flashes lighting the clouds. Rumors spread, war with Italy. Shock froze our hearts. Gallius. Early resistance is light, but heavy rain slows the Italian advance. Greek 8th Division Commander Charalambos Katsimitros chooses to hold the line at Kalpaki, where the Italians must cross open ground. By November 2nd, Italian troops reach the plain, only to be hit by Greek artillery from hidden positions. The Greeks lack anti-tank weapons but improvise, using blankets to jam tank tracks while gunners scatter Italian armor. Fighting centers around Grambala Hill, changing hands several times. As the skies clear, Italian aircraft begin bombing Greek defenses. A bomb whistled past and exploded 20 meters below my tent. A comrade screamed for help. I ran to the crater, his body torn apart, another man's inside spilled out. He died in my arms. My heart shattered. Chronopolis. While Italians falter at Kalpaki, the Giulia division pushes through the Pindus Mountains. They advance early against Greek reservists, but soon bog down under sniper fire, mud, and exhaustion. Reinforcements arrive on November 2nd, halting the Italians. Greek counterattacks recapture Samarina and threaten to encircle them. By November 8th, the Greeks seize Distrato, forcing Giulia to retreat, losing a fifth of its strength. With momentum shifting, Greece counterattacks into Albania. Enraged, Mussolini orders his air force to bomb every Greek city over 10,000 people. Bombings of Athens and other towns cause terror but little military effect, depriving Italian troops of needed air support. In Rome, frustration grows. Some ministers whisper about peace or even German help. Hitler, meeting Mussolini in Florence, explodes in fury when he learns of the invasion. The Führer was in a rage. This event has ruined many of his plans, and he doubted Italy could defeat Greece. Holland 4:14. November brings more disaster. On the night of November 11-12, the British launch a daring carrier attack on the Italian fleet at Taranto, crippling 3 battleships in one stroke. Meanwhile, the grinding campaign in Albania drains men and supplies needed in North Africa. By December, British fears of invasion fade. Reinforcements pour into Alexandria, Matilda tanks and Hurricane fighters among them. Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor, leading the Western Desert Force, plans a strike using speed and armor. The Matilda, nearly immune to Italian fire, will spearhead Operation Compass. In early December, British and Indian troops mass in Egypt. Naval guns and air raids batter Italian positions to disguise the buildup. Italian scouts notice some movement but dismiss it. Before dawn on December 9th, British forces storm Nibewa through scattered minefields. Italy's 23 M11 tanks are caught off guard, 13 destroyed within minutes by Matildas. One Italian doctor later wrote, "It was the nearest thing to hell I ever saw." Latimer 32. Lacking anti-tank weapons, Italian infantry throw grenades at steel giants to no avail. Despite brave resistance, the battle is one-sided. 4,000 Italians captured for just 2 British dead and 5 wounded. After taking Nibewa, the British sweep into Tummer West, crush a counterattack from Tummer East, and send the 4th Armored Brigade to block the Sidi-Barani-Bardia road. The assault continues the next day through sandstorms and artillery fire. British units navigate by compass alone, striking targets blind through the dust. Naval gunfire helps capture Mactila, though heavy Italian fire at Sidi-Barani halts Shelby force briefly. Italian morale collapses. Tummer East and Point 90 surrender as British artillery thunders across the desert. Air power and Matilda tanks now focus on Sidi-Barani. Soon it too falls. British mobile units rush west, chasing retreating Italians. One British soldier radios in humor. "Reached the 2nd B in Buk-Buk. Looks like 20 acres of officers and 100 acres of men." Latimer 37. In just 3 days, the British capture 38,000 Italians, 237 guns, and 73 tanks. Yet the Italians are not entirely crushed. They regroup in new positions. Meanwhile, more Greek advances in Albania seal a disastrous year for Mussolini. Instead of building a new Mediterranean empire, Italy's armies are being driven backward. In early December, Mussolini replaces Badoglio with Ugo Cavallero, while Rome enforces new mobilization and rationing. A weary recruit notes, "They're calling up more age groups now. We don't understand anything anymore, and the news sounds bad. For now, while they give us empty talk, all we can do is trust in God." Serpanlis. By the close of 1940, Italy has endured one military disaster after another. But why did its forces perform so poorly? After the war, historians pointed to weak troop quality, low morale, poor equipment, and Mussolini's impulsive leadership. They argue he rushed into war for glory without preparation, trusting propaganda instead of realistic strategy. Only 19 of Italy's 73 divisions were ready for combat in 1940. And its limited economy couldn't sustain major mobilization, producing just 2.7% of global manufacturing output versus Britain's 9.2% and Germany's 10.7%. Italy also relied on outdated World War I-era weapons. While most nations used some older gear, Italy's smaller industrial base prevented large-scale modernization or mass production of superior weapons like the 90mm anti-aircraft gun or the Beretta 1938 submachine gun. Outdated tools encouraged outdated thinking, colonial policing tactics instead of modern warfare. Even new equipment often went to police forces before frontline soldiers. As a result, Italian troops lacked automatic weapons, transport radios, and anti-tank arms, as well as training to use them effectively. Most Italian soldiers were peasants, and harsh class divisions created resentment toward strict conservative officers. One conscript from June 1940 recalled, "All the officers act like beasts. They punish us brutally. But once we move out, they'll pay for it. We'll do like the troops did in the last war." Bellomo. Still, lack of equipment wasn't the only problem. In Greece, Italian troops had gear comparable to the Greeks. Their failure came instead from poor planning, logistics, and terrain. Internal coordination was chaotic. Vital naval supply routes were unprepared, and the Navy learned of the invasion less than 2 weeks before it began. Italian intelligence accurately reported Greece's far greater strength, but Mussolini's high command ignored it. Italy thus went to war without numerical advantage, depending on unrealistic hopes like Bulgarian help or pro-Italian uprisings that never came. Many historians see Mussolini's imperial ambition as the root cause, but others argue Germany bears part of the blame. Mussolini may have dreamed of empire, yet he also knew Italy was unready. Unpreparedness wasn't unique. Only 24% of Italian divisions were combat-ready in 1940, compared to 34% of Germany's in 1939. Mussolini might not have been as loyal to the Pact of Steel as often assumed. Historian James Sadkovich suggests he joined it partly to restrain Hitler and even considered leaving in December 1939. Cooperation between Rome and Berlin was minimal, with both sides hiding their military plans. Sadkovich also claims Mussolini entered the war less to expand his empire and more to avoid German punishment for past defiance, such as his opposition to the 1938 Anschluss and his neutrality in 1939, when Germany's stunning victories made Hitler seem unstoppable. Mussolini feared being sidelined in Europe and losing influence in the Balkans. His sudden aggression in Egypt and Greece may have been less about exploiting Allied weakness and more about keeping pace with Germany's rising power. Mussolini's actions in Greece can be viewed not as a quest for outright conquest, but as an attempt to secure Italy's strategic flank. His goal was to wage what he called a guerra paralela, a parallel war, alongside the wider Second World War. Yet this approach inevitably brought Italy into direct conflict with Britain, which was engaged in a total war. As a result, Italy found itself dangerously overextended across the Mediterranean, a region vital to British survival but only of secondary importance to Germany. Rome's strategy depended on the assumption that Germany would soon invade Britain. However, deep mistrust, poor communication, and secrecy within the Axis meant Mussolini had no knowledge of Berlin's true plans, that Germany lacked both the intention and the ability to invade Britain, and was instead preparing to turn east toward the Soviet Union. This misunderstanding drew Italy into a long, multi-front war that its weaker economy was incapable of sustaining. Historian James Sadkovich argues that it was not cowardice or incompetence, but rather inferior equipment and motorization that caused the mass Italian surrenders during Operation Compass. Italian troops, unable to retreat across the desert on foot, had little choice but to surrender, though British accounts do record examples of determined Italian resistance. Sadkovich further contends that Anglo-American historians have often reinforced unfair stereotypes about Italian fighting ability by comparing them to the better-equipped Germans. He suggests that some Allied writers exaggerated German skill to rationalize their own early failures or glorify later victories. It is thus normal to dismiss as loss of nerve Graziani's request for permission to retreat in late 1940, even though a rapid retreat seems to have been what was needed. At the same time, Anglo-American writers tend to depict Rommel's various retreats as evidence of military genius. Sadkovich, 42. While Italy's poor industrial base and flawed command structure were certainly factors, this interpretation also draws attention to Germany's strategic failures, particularly its inability to force Britain into an all-out defense of the home islands. That failure allowed London to channel major resources into North Africa, expanding the conflict into one Italy could neither control nor sustain. In this sense, German mismanagement of the wider war, not merely Italian weakness or overreach, may have laid the foundation for Italy's collapse in 1940. Still, the fact remains that Italy's 1940 campaign ended in disaster. By late that year, Mussolini reluctantly sought German assistance. Berlin, which had paid little attention to Italian planning or logistics, agreed to support its struggling ally, albeit grudgingly. As one German officer put it, help was unwillingly given and unwillingly accepted. Ovary. On December 14, 1940, Hitler issued Directive No. 20, ordering preparations for German intervention in Greece. Meanwhile, Italian forces in North Africa continued to retreat. And in early 1941, a new German commander arrived in Libya, Erwin Rommel, leading the Afrika Korps. Rommel would later become one of Germany's most renowned generals. After his campaigns in North Africa, he took command of Army Group B in northern France in 1944, tasked with repelling the Allied invasion. He urged concentrating Germany's tank forces near the beaches, but failed to convince the high command. Despite organizing the Atlantic Wall defenses, he was severely wounded soon after D-Day, implicated in the July plot to assassinate Hitler, and forced to commit suicide. Army Group B eventually fell back across the Rhine and was surrounded in the Ruhr pocket, the final blow to German forces in the West. To explore these late war campaigns in greater depth, Real-Time History has produced two extensive documentaries. 16 Days in Berlin offers the most detailed day-by-day account of the Battle of Berlin ever made, complete with maps, on-site filming, and expert interviews. Rhineland 45 covers the last major battle on the Western Front, as Allied forces under Montgomery broke through from the Dutch border and crossed the Rhine. Due to their use of authentic wartime footage, these films aren't available on YouTube. You can watch both on Nebula, the streaming platform built by independent creators, at nebula.tv Real-Time History. A yearly subscription costs $36 and grants access to Rhineland 45, 16 Days in Berlin, Red Adams, and many other in-depth historical documentaries. Nebula subscriptions also make great gifts. You can purchase one at gift.nebula.tv Real-Time History, even for someone who already has an account. Every subscription directly supports Real-Time History and our mission to create uncompromising, well-researched historical content. Special thanks go to Marcus Linka, Athanasiu Volantis, and Dr. Vanda Wilcox for their assistance with this episode. For more on the North African campaign's conclusion, see our video on the Battle of Tunisia, 1943. As always, sources are listed in the description. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this has been a Real-Time History production, the history channel that still wonders when the English will finally begin to understand.